Welcome back, everybody. In today's video, we are breaking down my personal top 24 Dynasty wide receiver rankings. Now, there is going to be disagreement. You may not agree with the tiers. I don't have them in any particular order, so if you see one guy ahead of another within its own specific tier, don't take that as I'm saying this guy I would for sure take over this other guy. And there is going to be disagreement. So, instead of potentially just getting angry and yelling in the comments, if you could just let me know where you disagree and why, and then perhaps if you would, list your own personal top 24 Dynasty wide receiver rankings below in the comment section, that would be awesome. I know, especially towards the end, there are going to be some players that I might personally have up there that you might not for various reasons, such as ageism, expected production in the future, win now production. It just depends on the context, right? So if you would, once again, let me know below in the comment section. We're going to begin here with the S tier. This is comprised of Jamar Chase, Malik Neighbors, Justin Jefferson, and CeeDee Lamb. With Jamar Chase, he's finished as the wide receiver 5, 12, 11, and 1 in a full PPR setting here within his first 4 NFL seasons. He's connected to Joe Burrow long term. They did re-sign T. Higgins as well, but Jamar Chase just finished as the Triple Crown winner with T. Higgins playing. The defense is still probably going to be terrible, and I think he absolutely deserves to be in this S tier, and I doubt anyone really disagrees. Now we have Malik Neighbors also in the S tier here. He finished as the wide receiver 6 in only 15 games in a full PPR setting. And fun fact, his rookie season points per game was higher than anyone you are going to see on this list, despite having horrible, worse than 32nd best quarterback play for the majority of the season. Daniel Jones was the best quarterback he played with. That says everything you need to know. Now, in terms of target competition, they didn't add any. He has the absolute potential to be the wide receiver 1 this season, and I actually am predicting that he does finish there. I think he's going to see a ton of targets, and I think he's going to see increased accuracy with his targets, especially with Russell Wilson deep down the sideline on those moon balls. If you watched any Malik Neighbors tape this past season, you saw countless times on those slot fades and those goes, he had to work back to the football because it was underthrown every time. He probably had another 4 to 5 touchdowns he could have scored if he wasn't underthrown by 20 yards. Moving on to wide receiver 3, we have Justin Jefferson. So he's obviously deserved to be in this tier. He's finished as the wide receiver 6, 4, 1, 33, but only in 10 games, and wide receiver 2 overall. If you had him as your wide receiver 1, I would not argue whatsoever. He is, in my opinion, the best real-life wide receiver in the NFL. That may or may not translate every season to scoring as the wide receiver 1 overall, but he's already done it once, and he's in a perfect offensive system. He has playmakers to distract defenses, even though he still gets double teamed quite a bit. It doesn't matter. He's too good. JJ McCarthy is interesting at quarterback. We'll have to see how that plays out this year. But regardless, he's as QB proof as there is, in my opinion. And if you have him, he's not even 26 years old yet. He is a cornerstone of your team, and he is just going to be great. Then we have CeeDee Lamb. So he's coming off a wide receiver 8 finish in only 15 games. He was the wide receiver 1 back in 2023. And in other seasons, he's finished as a wide receiver 22, 19, and 5 overall. He's absolutely dominant. He's also rather quarterback proof in my opinion, a yak monster. They added George Pickens into the wide receiver core, but I don't really think that hurts him. He's going to see a ridiculous amount of target volume. He's really good. And if anything, it should potentially help because, George Pickens is going to be a monster deep down those sidelines on those vertical routes. And I think he is set up for success this season and is going to be dominant for us in fantasy. Moving on to tier 2. Now, with some of these wide receivers, I could definitely understand them being in your tier 1. We have players such as Brian Thomas, Puka Nacua, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. With Brian Thomas, he finished as the wide receiver 4 overall in a full 17-game slate as a rookie. Now, they added Travis Hunter. That is decent target competition, but I think that both can thrive. We saw just as soon as this past season in the Liam Cohen offense that both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin could be wide receiver 1s in points per game. There's really just nothing to worry about here. I think that, Travis Hunter maybe limits his potential maximum ceiling, but I still think that it's within the realm of possibilities that he finishes as the wide receiver 1. He's absolutely dominant. This guy is a true 3-level threat, great in the screen game, really good at yards after catch ability, and just has blazing speed. And a lot of people love to hate on Trevor Lawrence, but he has one of the best deep balls in the NFL. Seriously, look up the advanced stats on that. He is a perfect fit in this offense. I think he's going to be moved all around the formation, and he is going to dominate. Then we have Puka Nacua. He's somebody that I would love to have in the S tier. In terms of his play on the field, it is S tier production. However, we've seen time and time again that throughout his collegiate career, he was hurt over and over again. It caused his draft stock to slide. He did play technically 17 games as a rookie and finished as a wide receiver 4 in a full PPR setting. However, we had injury scare after injury scare basically every other week with him, and then we saw this past season where he finished as a wide receiver 26 in 11 games that when he was on the field, he was fantastic. But he missed significant time again with another knee injury. I personally am making this distinction because I just would much rather have the S-tier wide receivers over him because of those injury concerns. I really worry with repeated knee injuries with him. But nonetheless, he's a very talented player, a really good guy, a really fun player to watch, and an absolute stud who, if he is your wide receiver 1, you should be very proud to have him there. Then we have Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's finished as a wide receiver 21, 7, 3, and 3 in 4 NFL seasons. So, he's never shown that wide receiver 1 overall ability, but he's, finished as a top 3 wide receiver 2 seasons in a row. I do worry with, the retirement of their center Ragnow, as well as the departure of Ben Johnson, that there could be some decline in the total production for this offense, a decrease in efficiency. But nonetheless, I still think he's a locked-in wide receiver 1. I think he's one of the safest floor guys there is. He's connected to Jared Goff, a very accurate quarterback, pocket passer type. And I think the ceiling might not be what we saw from him in, the past 3 seasons, but I still think that he's a locked-in wide receiver 1, and he's a very talented player. Moving on to the B tier, we have wide receivers that I think are less likely to be the wide receiver 1 overall, but I think are lock and loaded wide receiver 1s. We have Nico Collins, Drake London, and Ladd McConkey. With Nico Collins, in the past 2 seasons with CJ Stroud, he's finished as a wide receiver 12 and 23, but you'll notice that in his 4-year NFL career, he's only played 14, 10, 15, and 12 games. He has yet to finish as any higher than wide receiver 12 because he just cannot stay healthy. Soft tissue injury after soft tissue injury. It is a concern with him. I think he's really talented. If he were to play a full season, I think that he could be the wide receiver 1, I guess. I just think it's much less likely because we just have not seen it yet. But yeah, nonetheless, still a locked and loaded wide receiver 1. Then we have Drake London. With Drake London, he had that ridiculous 40-point game at the end in week 18, which unfortunately didn't really help anybody, to push him up to the wide receiver 5. I believe he was a mid to low end wide receiver 1 before that. Nonetheless, very talented. If we see more of what we saw with him at Michael Penix in that very small sample size, I think I could definitely push him much higher than this. But until we see more of that, I do want to be a little bit cautious. I think one thing that could potentially prevent him from being the wide receiver 1 is a lack of total receptions. I still think he's going to be in that 80 to 90 range, but I'm not sure if he can get into that 115 to 120 range that we see with a lot of these guys that finishes the wide receiver 1 overall. I think that he could potentially offset some of that with high touchdown scoring because he's a good touchdown threat. But nonetheless, I still think he's a locked and loaded wide receiver 1. He's still only 23 years old despite playing in 3 full NFL seasons going into his 4th. Very young player, very high upside. Then we have Ladd McConkey. In 16 games, he finishes the wide receiver 13 overall this past season in a full point PPR. He also kind of has injury concerns. He missed a lot of time in college, and he did get dinged up a couple times and did miss a game this past season. So he's one of these guys that I'm a little bit wary of because of the injuries, but nonetheless, very talented player connected to Justin Herbert as the team's easily wide receiver 1. I think we can expect good things from him. I think he's going to be a very safe floor option. Maybe he doesn't have some of the ceiling, I don't think, of some of these other guys, but nonetheless, very talented player, and if he's your wide receiver 1, you should be happy. Now we move on to the C tier. I think these guys are very valuable in that they're young, they have a ton of upside. I think, though, they're probably just more likely to going to be, mid wide receiver 2s to potentially low end wide receiver 1s at the best, with Marvin Harrison Jr. definitely being the biggest question mark. First, we have JSN, though. After finishing as the wide receiver 48, there were plenty of people that were really concerned. I was telling everybody he's really talented. Look at the film, look at the advanced stats after his rookie season. He had 2 game-winning touchdowns, and it's not his fault that he was the wide receiver 3 behind Metcalf and Lockett with Geno Smith throwing the football. We saw he exploded as a sophomore with a wide receiver 9 finish in a full PPR setting. I do have him a little bit lower than I would preferably like him to be based on his talent, because with the signing of Cooper Kupp and with Sam Darnold there, I do worry that Darnold kind of implodes with them not having as good of an offensive line, even though they addressed it in the draft. Plus, I think Cooper Kupp is going to play a lot of slot work where I think JSN is best. Although JSN can win on the outside, he can win as an X, he can win as a flanker. It really doesn't matter. I think he's really talented. I think he's your Amon-Ra St. Brown type of profile in the sense of, probably not quite as many touchdowns as some of these other elite guys, but very good in terms of racking up a lot of receptions and a good, very high floor PPR option. Really talented though. Then we have Marvin Harrison Jr. He definitely disappointed based on what a lot of people expected with a wide receiver 30 finish. However, with 885, I believe it was, receiving yards and 8 touchdowns, that's a CeeDee Lamb-like rookie season. That's really not bad at all. People are freaking out thinking he's terrible, and it's just not true at all. He was used as poorly as you could possibly imagine. He's really good on the dig routes and those crossers, yet he was mainly utilized as a vertical X, a sacrificial X, as people like to call it nowadays, where you're running those go balls and those fades. Kyler Murray did not throw very catchable passes a lot of time, and Marvin Harrison definitely did struggle in contested catch situations. I think, though, that we see an increase in production. I think we see anywhere from, 1,000 to 1,150 yards, and we see double-digit touchdowns this season. I think that he's going to finish as a high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1 type for us. And if anybody's freaking out, I'm buying. I think this is the lowest he's going to be valued until he's probably 27 or 28 when everybody freaks out about wide receiver age. And yeah, very good player. Then we have Garrett Wilson. There was always a question of, is he elite? Is he not elite? Well, he finished as a top 10 wide receiver in a full PPR setting, wide receiver 11.5 point PPR. Considering, he had old man Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball, a very poor offensive line in terms of how they played, and they signed Devontae Adams halfway through the season, and then Rodgers shamelessly stat-padded Adams. I think that, the wide receiver 10 finish is fine with me. He's a very talented player. He's still only 24 years old, going to be 25. If he's your wide receiver 1, I'm a little bit less happy with some of these 3 guys being your wide receiver 1 per se. I'd be much happier if they were your wide receiver 2, but definitely fine. I think they have, once again, the ability to be a low-end wide receiver 1 this season, and I think you need to be excited because I think all 3 of these guys could see a massive jump in production, especially with Garrett Wilson and Marvin Harrison Jr. With JSN, I think when or if Cooper Kupp is injured, he's going to be able to reclaim more of that slot role. And I think that if that were to happen, or when, that he is going to produce a lot more than he is with Kupp in the lineup. But nonetheless, all 3 of these guys are absolute studs. And I want to give a special shout out to my Patreon members. Thank you to Big Hunt, SP, Mage Shack, and Infamy MTG. If you would like to become a Patreon member, the link's going to be below in the comment section. There we're going to have weekly live streams where we go over, fantasy news, potential buy low candidates, sell high candidates, depending on the news. We're going to give you specific league-oriented roster construction with trade advice based on your specific league settings there. We're going to give you access to early videos. We're going to give you the ability to suggest videos as well. I made a private video for someone on Isaac Rendo, some of the pluses, minuses to his game, things to like, and specific price points to sell or buy for. You're also going to find that we are working on a model with predictive capability for running backs, quarterbacks, tight ends, and wide receivers based on a variety of specific metrics, minimums and maximums to be in an acceptable range for us in fantasy that will be predictive and lead us to being able to be more successful, we think, than the average person in determining which prospects based on these thresholds are likely to hit or unlikely to hit. And we're also going to be updating that each and every single year with the new prospects so that we can continuously have the best model possible. So once again, if you'd like to become a member, the link's going to be below in the comment section. Thanks. Now we have our D tier of wide receivers. We have players such as Rashee Rice, Travis Hunter, Tetroy McMillan, T. Higgins, and AJ Brown. With Rashee Rice, there is a question mark of him coming off the knee injury. It was the PLC, I believe, and the LCL with him, and not an ACL tear, which is great for us in fantasy. There is also the possibility of a suspension, but we've seen with players like Jordan Addison that it just didn't happen, so I'm not really particularly worried. He is probably the one player on this in these rankings that I think has the highest ability to just move up instantly if we see early production from him this season. He's connected to Patrick Mahomes in that high volume Travis Kelce-like role, the yak role. A very good player, going to be in a great offense, and I think we potentially see a little bit of defensive regression from Kansas City this season, which I think could produce more offensive explosion. So, he also averaged, I believe it was over 16 points per game, and it was over 18 if you take out that final game where he played and Mahomes took him out. He was looking like an absolute locked-in wide receiver 1, and he especially took over the back half of his rookie season as well. I think he's a very talented player and has, once again, the ability to move up massively in these rankings, just depending on what he looks like. Then we have Travis Hunter. I have him ranked as an elite prospect for us in fantasy. I have him ranked for fantasy purposes, just half a point where I had Malik Neighbors coming out as a prospect. He has the best ball skills I've probably ever seen from a wide receiver prospect. He's an elite athlete, incredible change of direction, explosion. He's also a cornerback, so he understands defensive tendencies and how to set up cornerbacks for failure. He slots in next to Brian Thomas, although once again, like I explained with Brian Thomas Jr., I don't think that it's a problem. I think the targets are going to be consolidated to mostly between these two. I'm not worried about his snaps. I think he's an absolutely elite prospect. I love that Trevor Lawrence is throwing on the ball with Liam Cohen coaching. I think he's going to be schemed up perfectly. And I think he has absolute positional versatility in this offense, just like Brian Thomas does. And I think we're going to see some huge boom games from this guy. Then we have Tetroy McMillan. He lands as Carolina's wide receiver 1. Obviously, he's a rookie, so just like with Hunter, we don't have any fantasy finishes from him so far. I think he's going to slot in as their X predominantly, but I do think he sees some slot work. He can be a flanker. He has absolute positional versatility. He's very good after the catch, has, iron grips for hands. I think he's going to be a good fit for this offense. I love that Dave Canales, the offensive-minded head coach, is going to be coaching him. Bryce Young is a very accurate quarterback, especially on those deep throws. And while Tetroy McMillan doesn't really separate perfectly in a straight line on the boundary, he can win on those crossing routes. He can win on the slants, on the digs. So I'm not really worried about his fit in the offense either. I think he's going to be a very high volume option for us. And he could, once again, just like Travis Hunter and Rashee Rice, slide way up in these rankings depending on what he does. Then we have T. Higgins. T. Higgins has never finished any higher than the wide receiver 17 overall in any individual finish. He's finished as a wide receiver 28, 24, 18, 51, and 17. He always has these little nagging injuries that cause him to miss time almost every year. He didn't miss time in 2022. But he finishes as a wide receiver 17 in only 12 games. This Bengals defense is atrocious. I don't think it's going to get much better. Trey Hendrickson is holding out. Their first round pick, I believe, hasn't shown up yet if he hasn't signed, if I'm remembering that correctly. I think their defense is going to be terrible. I think we're going to see quite a bit of passing volume. And, if he just didn't have so many injuries all the time and wasn't getting a little bit older, I would have him higher up these rankings. But it shouldn't shock anybody if he finishes a wide receiver 1 in terms of top 12, health permitting here. Then we have A.J. Brown. So he actually saw a huge decrease in total volume with the addition of Saquon Barkley to this offense. Barkley in the tush push, that's a lot of rushing volume in terms of total plays, yards, and touchdowns. But he still finished in only 13 games as a wide receiver 20 overall. We saw that almost half of the time, if I remember correctly, I believe it was 6 out of 13 games, he finished as a top 12 wide receiver. And he's finished as a wide receiver 21, 12, 32, 6, 5, and 20 during his NFL career. He's getting a little bit older. He's going to be 28 relatively soon, I believe. Only 27 now, though. I don't really see any reason for concern. Sure, he's not going to see quite as much volume in this offense unless Barkley goes down, in my opinion. But he doesn't really need to. He's proven that he can be efficient on, relatively low target rates. And he's going to be scoring plenty of touchdowns. And he is a dominant wide receiver 1. And I doubt he's going to jump much higher in these rankings just because he is starting to get a little bit older. But once again, if guys are worried about A.J. Brown, I'm buying. He's not even 28 years old yet, and he's proven time and time again that he can be a dominant wide receiver 1 for us in fantasy. Now we have the E-tier wide receivers. These are wide receivers that I think are potentially blocked by their situations, but they're both really young, have first-round draft capital, and I think are going to be very good in the NFL for quite a long time. First, we have Rome Odunze. Rome finished as wide receiver 49 in 17 games, but he got JSN'd. He was behind, Keenan Allen and DJ Moore in a rookie offense with Caleb Williams and a Shane Waldron, more importantly, offense, led by the poor coaching of Matt Eberflus. It was a disaster situation. He still had over 700 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns despite these circumstances. He led the NFL in, I believe, uncatchable deep air yards, I believe it's that specific stat, but nonetheless, his total uncatchable or unrealized air yards was massive. I think that we're going to see an improved usage from him in this offense. I think he's moved all around. And more importantly, I don't think anyone on this offense is even remotely close to as good as he is as an X, and the X is always going to be on the field. And so, with Rome Odunze, I just think that he's super talented. I think he has double-digit touchdown upside, and I do think that he has the ability to establish himself firmly as a wide receiver 1 in this offense. Now, sure, Ben Johnson didn't draft him. He drafted Luther Burden, who profiles to be more of your slot flanker type than your X, and Colston Loveland, who's your move tight end. So I think that he can establish himself as the number 1 target in this offense once again. He's only 23 years old. I think he just turned 23 if I'm remembering correctly. Very good player, and I love that he has Ben Johnson as his head coach. I think he is a very willing blocker, despite at times not being the best at it as a rookie, but the effort was there, and I think Ben Johnson's going to like that. Then we have Emeka Egbuka. He's going to get JSN in my opinion. He has Chris Godwin ahead of him and Mike Evans. He resembles more so Chris Godwin, your power slot, than he does Mike Evans, your true X. But, he has Baker Mayfield throwing on the ball, and both of those guys ahead of him are older. I don't think Jalen McMillan is really any concern. I think McMillan is going to be firmly the wide receiver 4 in this offense. And so, first round draft capital, I think that he could potentially be a very good buy low, partway into the season if guys are freaking out. If you drafted him in your rookie drafts, I don't know how you expected him to just immediately have, game-breaking production. It's the same thing we should have been thinking about with Rome Odunze and JSN. But if your league mates are worried about it, after the rookie season or potentially before the playoffs and you want to buy, I would do so. I think he's a very safe player. I think he resembles JSN, Chris Olave type as a wide receiver. And they also all happen to go to Ohio State. But nonetheless, a very good player, and I think that in the future he is going to be a very high upside and extremely safe floor guy for us in fantasy. And finally, we have the F tier wide receivers. We have players like Devontae Smith, Xavier Worthy, Jameson Williams, and Zay Flowers. So with Devontae Smith, he's finished as wide receiver 29, 9, 19, and 27. But this past season as a wide receiver 27, he only played in 13 games, and he only played in 16 games in 2023. So I think he's firmly entrenched as a solid wide receiver 2 for us. I think that he's probably going to go down in these rankings this next season, just being another year older. Probably just never being the wide receiver 1 in his offense unless A.J. Brown happens to be injured. But a very solid real-life football player, a very useful asset for us in fantasy. The upside isn't, what some of these other guys is on a week-to-week basis, but there's generally a decent floor, and he's a very talented player. Then we have Xavier Worthy. He finished as a wide receiver 33 in 17 games. He really came on strong at the end of the season, especially in the Super Bowl, even if one of those touchdowns was a garbage time touchdown. I think that, with Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice, your opinion on one or the other is going to dictate who is ahead of another, and then where you kind of want to rank these guys. I think that Rashee Rice has the potential to move way higher up these rankings because he's a bigger guy. It's just a better fit for the high volume slot kind of role in this Chiefs offense, the Travis Kelce type of role. So I think that Xavier Worthy is going to be more so used as your deep threat, your movement guy to kind of get these, horizontal routes against man coverage against. And I think he's adept at those abilities. And I think that that's another reason why I loved this fit for him with Kansas City, and why if he would have been drafted into most other offenses, I would not have liked him whatsoever coming out in terms of for fantasy purposes. But I think that the floor and the ceiling is just capped as long as Rashee Rice is healthy. And so my opinion of him is, because I like Rashee Rice and I think that he's going to be good for the long term, that I'm going to be a little bit lower on Worthy. But it's not because he's not talented. It's just because I don't think the role that he's going to have is going to translate into as much consistency and upside as the role of Rashee Rice in this Chiefs offense. Then we have Jameson Williams. After being selected in the top 12 of his rookie draft in 2022, he didn't really do very much for us coming off the ACL tear. Then he was wide receiver 82 in 12 games as a sophomore. Then this past season, he was wide receiver 22 in only 15 full games. He's an extremely explosive player. I do worry that with the loss of Ben Johnson, just like with Amon-Ra St. Brown, that we see a lack of the same level of efficiency and EPA that we saw with this Lions offense the past couple seasons. But nonetheless, he's with an accurate quarterback in Jared Goff. He is, in my opinion, the fastest wide receiver in the NFL right now. He is dangerous no matter where you put him. And I think that, you're going to get, sure, you're kind of frustrating weeks with him, but especially in a best ball setting, man, This guy has ridiculous weekly upside, and any given week, he could be the wide receiver 1 overall in that given week. Very talented player. Then finally, we have Zay Flowers here. He's finished as wide receiver 31 and 25 in the past 2 seasons. You know, he's kind of like Jameson Williams, not in terms of actual real-life play style, but in the sense of he has pretty decent upside weeks for us, but it's just a lack of consistency, and the floor isn't quite what we would want. I do think that we see a little bit better of year 3 from him, though. I think he's easily, by far and away, the best wide receiver in this offense. They just re-signed Rashad Bateman, rather. And so I like that because it's not going to present as much target competition, having them potentially draft somebody and invest highly in another wide receiver, potentially sign them or trade for them. I doubt they do that, at least. Obviously, you're going to have Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews there, and Derrick Henry running the ball with Lamar Jackson. So you're going to probably see some frustrating weeks from a floor perspective, but I think he's a very talented player, and I do think we see a bump in year 3, and I think he's going to be a firm wide receiver 2 for us in fantasy. Now, there's a couple players that just missed this list, and some that aren't included in the pictures here. We have players such as Terry McLaurin. He's 29, he's going to be 30, but we saw that he put up massive touchdown numbers, which could fluctuate. But, you know, the wide receiver 1 with Jaden Daniels, I think, is a very good role. He's incredible with the ball in his hands. He's a very good vertical threat. And I just wish that it didn't take until his age, 29 season for him to finally get a talented quarterback to throw him the football. It's been extremely frustrating. You have to feel for him. Then we have DJ Moore. He's 28 years old right now. Still in his prime, probably sooner or later going to start declining as a player, though. I think just due to age, I have him a little bit lower, but very talented player, and he could theoretically be the wide receiver 1 in this Bears offense. It wouldn't shock me whatsoever. Like I said, very good player. Then we have Chris Olave, another example of a great player, but he's had horrible quarterback play. He's had quarterback play that sent him to the hospital with concussions time and time again. I just want to see him put together a really good season. It's kind of like, what we saw with Garrett Wilson before this past season, where we know he's really good. It's just, if he's not going to put up that kind of season, it doesn't really matter, right? So we'll see if Tyler Shuck is the answer. I'm a little bit skeptical, to be honest with you. Pretty skeptical, actually, if I'm being honest. But nonetheless, I think that, in a best case scenario, they're a terrible team this year, and they get him a quarterback in 2026, like Nussmeier. I think it's pretty unlikely, but maybe Arch Manning comes out. There is the potential for the future with him, and he's still relatively young. Very good player. Then we have Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison has had, I believe, 19 touchdowns in his first 2 NFL seasons. He's been a prolific touchdown scorer. If he does it again, then I think we can just throw, potential touchdown regression out the window. The quarterback situation is a little bit questionable with JJ McCarthy. We'll see if he looks good. I understand that, with KOC, such a great play caller and an offensive mind, that he's made just about anybody in this offense produce as a quarterback. I do like that for JJ McCarthy's future. And he was drafted in the first round, even if it wasn't one of these top 3 guys like the Mays, the Caleb Williams, and the Jaden Daniels. Nonetheless, though, he is in the shadow of Justin Jefferson, firmly as the wide receiver 2. But, should Justin Jefferson miss any time, he has the potential to be a solid fill-in for the wide receiver 1 role in this offense and a ton of upside. He's just kind of one of those guys, once again, like with the Flowers, where the floor on a week-to-week basis is frustrating, but he has a ridiculous ceiling. And then another player I don't have pictured here is Matthew Golden. So with Matthew Golden, the analytical profile coming out was atrocious. He really didn't break out in terms of from a production standpoint. He did have some very good games at the end of his junior season against elite competition, and he was selected in the first round. Now with this Packers offense, I am worried that they're going to slot him into the Christian Watson role as a purely vertical wide receiver. If that were to happen, that is just not a fantasy-friendly role, despite the fact that I think he's a talented player. So that's why I have him a little bit lower. If I knew that he could be used, first of all, targeted as a wide receiver 1, I know they haven't had one. They've had a bunch of 2s. So we've just never seen anybody really just be targeted like as the wide receiver 1. But if he is targeted as a wide receiver 1 and isn't given that Christian Watson vertical Z role, I'm in. But if he isn't, I just don't think he's going to put up the fantasy points for us consistently, at least. And because I have that concern, I'm going to have him a little bit lower in these rankings. So once again, if you disagree, feel free to let me know below in the comment section. Let me know your personal top 24 Dynasty wide receiver rankings. I'm 100% certain that we disagree at least somewhere in these rankings. Yeah, and I'm going to be doing Dynasty rankings in both running backs, tight ends, and 4-point and 6-point passing touchdown quarterback rankings. So check out those later this week and into next week. Once again, feel free to subscribe to my Patreon. I would really appreciate your support. Thank you. Please give this video a like and subscribe. Thank you and have a good day.